I guess as a young artist, you kind of need to think about what kind of life do you want? Do you want the life of the hustle, or do you want the life of the easy gig where I go in 9 to 5 and I get my paycheck, but you're never really secure because if that company shuts down, your network is incredibly small, right? So, for instance, I worked at Rhythm and Hughes for 4 or 5 years, but some of the people there were there for 15, 20 years. They knew no one else in the industry unless they came through Rhythm, and they knew no other software unless, Rhythm had trained them in it. And Rhythm at the time had their own proprietary software. So they didn't know any other software other than what Rhythm had. So when Rhythm and Hughes shut down, they were hosed because they didn't know anyone. They'd never been anywhere, things like that. So you have security, but you kind of don't, right? So here's where a person needs to evaluate what kind of life do you want? Do you want to be freelance and do you want to hustle, or do you want to work for the studios and have your gig kind of guaranteed for you? And that's totally up to personal preference. There's pros and cons to each. But the way that I did it is I went employee first, make the contacts, get the experience, get paid to train, get better and better and better. And then once you have the contacts, then you can jump to be freelance.
Please welcome today's guest, the awesome Nick Hiatt. Nick is our newest instructor and teaches 3D sequence illustration, which allows you to tell amazing stories by utilizing a cutting-edge 3D workflow that's accessible to anyone. As an art director, map painter, and concept artist, Nick is immensely experienced. An extensive career has seen him rise through the ranks and obtain knowledge and sharpen skills by working on the biggest projects for some of the biggest studios. In this episode, Nick shares his very experience by giving an honest insight into how to succeed as a creative in the entertainment industry by touching upon topics such as how to network, how to take risks, the 3D revolution, as well as an insight into his amazing new course. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Let's go. Welcome to the Lens Squared podcast. Today's guest is the amazing Nick Hiatt. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, everyone.
How you doing?
Great, man. It's good to be here. Happy to share this course and happy to get everyone trained up a little bit.
Yes, the course just released yesterday, so congratulations on that. 3D sequence illustration.
Thank you.
Where basically you cover literally everything about image creation through the lens of 3D, I guess. With characters, sets, shot design, and painting.
Yep. It kind of covers my process of the workflow I've been using over the past couple of years, and I've been developing. So it's a good time to share that.
Yeah. Let's get into the workflow. So you mentioned the last couple of years. How familiar have you been with 3D?
I started using 3D back in 1999, so that dates me a little bit. I think I started using 3D Max when it was owned by Kinetex.
Right.
So this is a long, long time ago.
So this is before the Autodesk days came over and took everything over.
Totally, way before. Mm-hmm. I know that dates me a little bit, but hey, it's just how it is.
Was that like poly modeling, right?
Yes, it was all poly. All poly. They had some NURBS, but NURBS back then were just difficult. They weren't like they are today.
My first foray into 3D, I did transport design at university, was straight into NURBS, and I've still got PTSD from that.
I'm sorry about that.
But obviously the results are amazing for what they need, what they're required for. But when I got into poly modeling, which was a few years afterwards, it felt a bit more liberating. And
totally
your art career. So back in 3D, back in 1999, where were you at right then in your career?
Yep, I had just took my first AutoCAD course in high school, and I kind of got to feel, cool, this is really cool. I love doing design. I love just being able to zoom in on my screen, because back in the day, just being able to zoom into a screen was like mind blowing for me. I'm like, this is awesome. Yeah. So then right after high school, I kind of got into that, and then there was a CAD course they offered in my community college, and as soon as I started taking the CAD, my teacher's like, dude, you should be using 3D. Forget this CAD thing for you. Nice. And he showed me Max, and from that day forward, I did not turn back. I'm like, this is it. This is awesome. I can see this will be an awesome field moving forward, and there's a lot of room for growth. So that's kind of was my first introduction to 3D. Mm-hmm. And of course, I had been drawing and painting since I was a little kid, so I'd taken tons of art classes. Art was kind of my focus once I hit around 16 or 17.
Yep.
And then once I got turned on to 3D, that was it. I did not look back, and it was all hands on deck from that point forward.
Like, was it like definitely something that, I guess, like a bug, right? You caught it and then you couldn't let it go.
Kind of, yeah. And like, honestly, what it was, I was hanging out with my buddies one night. I think we were 16 or 17, and I saw my first Japanese animation, which was Ninja Scroll.
Right.
And then right after that, I watched a all 3D like animation video called Beyond the Mind's Eye.
Yeah.
And I guess it was meant for like people at raves or whatever. So it was like really old 3D, but it was kind of trippy, kind of cool looking.
Yeah.
And then I saw the credits play after. I'm like, oh my God, this is like 30 people who got paid to do this. I'm like, boom, that's me. Nice. So that's kind of what did it for this particular avenue of my art career. I was like, this is it. I saw the videos. I saw my first Japanese anime. Ninja Scroll blew my mind. I think I've seen it like 1,000 times since. Wow. Still one of my favorite movies. And I kind of like that. Oh man, this is cool. I didn't know animation and cartoons could be this rad. This is what's up.
Prior to that, I guess, like, well, let's say you never came across 3D in the way that you did. How do you think your trajectory would have taken in terms of your career, maybe your path?
I don't know that I would have gone down the art road. Honestly, because growing up drawing and painting, unfortunately, some people say, oh, you're never going to make a career as a painter, starving artist, whatever. And I totally proved that wrong. But I don't know that I would have had the confidence or maybe the passion to go had I not seen entertainment art, right? Like had I not really seen those videos and watched those credits and been like, oh my God, this can actually happen. Yeah. Because, there was natural fear of that. So I don't know that my art probably honestly would have joined the military. Okay. That's kind of where I was heading at that age. I grew up in a small farm town and was zero options for me. The factories were gone and all that stuff. So I'm very thankful for watching that Ninja Scroll and Beyond the Mind's Eye video. Changed my life.
Farm life. So you mentioned that in lesson 1 of your course, which is free to everyone listening. So you can check that out. Yep. So I guess obviously that's your family's farm, right?
Yes. Yep. Old farm family, like 6-7 generations.
Wow. And
hard work was just a part of the game back then.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just the given, right?
Yep.
So that really I actually like to hear that when you mentioned that, because I was just thinking like first time obviously we were speaking together properly. Obviously I followed your work for a few years now, and I was thinking this guy, he does many things. Obviously art director, you're a concept artist, you're a map painter, you run a company. I think you're a chest hair model as well. Some rumors on the internet are. But it's like that only comes from like a certain kind of hustle. So you always want to know where everyone's hustle comes from. And obviously you mentioned that it's your bringing on a farm. Would you mind going into a bit of detail about that? Like as in what kind of key things that you took from there?
Sure, definitely. That's a great thing to touch on. Like as a kid, I hated it because I hated working all the time, and it was chores all the time. Yeah. But it was that kind of discipline and that kind of relentless, grit that kind of got me to where I am today. Because it's very easy to be an artist and not work hard, just kind of do what you like, and kind of just let things happen. Kind of be a lily pad, just float, be cool, do your thing. Yeah. But I guess a big part of my upbringing forced me that hard work was the only way to get anything done. And that's kind of just what had happened. I started out, my first gig out of college was doing Sandals, like a Sandals hotel resort. They put out their weekly magazine, and I'd basically clean all the people out and make it look like no one has ever been there ever. Yeah. So that was kind of my first job. And then from now on, cool, I can do this myself. So I started my own company. I tried to get my own gigs, and I kind of did that through college. And then after college, it's like, okay, cool, I can kind of do this. Then from that point on, I've been kind of working from studios here, working for studios there. And then eventually, as soon as I got enough credit and enough contacts, I started my own companies. And then from that point on, it was just about hustling and hustling and hustling. And that's one of the most important things that I tell younger students. There's 3 things you really got to do. You got to network, you got to train, and you got to work harder than the person around you. You just got to do it. And then if you have those 3 variables, you will succeed and you will surpass everybody around you.
Nice. That's simple, and that's great. With the companies, how old were you when you started those?
Let's see. My first company I started was called Media Soldiers. That was in Florida with one of my good buddies, Eli Lacardi. Yeah. We started that in, I think, probably 1999, something like that, 2000, something like like that. So pretty much as soon as I got my first gig doing that, those brochure cleanup for sandals, I'm like, dude, I can do this for a quarter of the price. These guys are doing it, and all I need is contacts, and that was all it took.
That's interesting because, like, with at least from my perspective and some of the people that I've come across, and even just like not even in the art world, just generally coming across people, everyone's got ideas, everyone's got skills, but starting a company seems very intimidating to a lot of people, even to myself. And you did it at a very young age. Did you feel any intimidation at that time, or was it just, did it feel like crystal clear for you, like this is the way I need to go?
It was 100% intimidating. But you know, that's you know, you got to rise above, and you can't be afraid to fail. So like from the ashes of failure rise the flames of success. So you have to keep that in mind, and like, don't be afraid to fail. Failure is how you learn.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, I've started 5 companies since then. So if that tells you anything.
Wow.
So some of them have failed, some of them succeeded, some of them were no longer relevant, so they're down. So you know, it's really about trial and error, and you know, make tactical decisions. Don't say, oh, I'm going to start a company, it's going to totally work. No, you got to have your variables together. You got to have your clients together. You got to have a solid business plan. And, you know, you got to have perseverance. Like, there's going to be bad years. There's going to be bad times. Like, you know, bad times right now. Everyone's struggling through COVID, right? So it's this character that you need, and that thick skin that you need to do this. Like, for instance, one of the toughest times that I had starting a company was when I was very comfortable here in California. I had been here for about 7 years. I had been working, you know, for all the big studios, Rhythm and Hughes, Digital Domain, Sony, ImageWorks. And then I was very comfortable. I was a matte painting supervisor. I was staff, which, you know, in the freelance world, staff was like this holy grail. Oh, you're staff. Cool, man. You're so lucky. You got benefits. And it took me a long time to get there. Right. Wow. So at a certain point when I was there, I was comfortable. It was really hard to leave. But I was like, look, you know, I want to work for myself. I know that I can do it. I got the contacts now. I know I have the experience, but it was hard to get off the, you know, the comfortability and, you know, safety of a Sony at the time. I said, well, you know what, I think I can do it. And it's just about taking that leap of faith, but it's a calculated leap. Don't just jump off the ship without a life vest. Right. And that was kind of it. So I knew I had the contacts. And this is right around the time that when California visual effects industry really started to do heavy outsourcing.
Right.
And so they were shipping a lot of work out of the States for tax incentives, things like that. And I said, look, you know, this is a good time to actually do this because they're looking for cheaper alternatives, and I can become one. So essentially, I had one client. I jumped off the started my own, you know, little shop, and from that point on, I got super slammed. And I was able to hire my buddies who I had met throughout all this time to help me kind of ebb and flow. So I would have one job, I could handle it myself. Now I get 3 jobs, and I'd be buried. So I'd hire my buddies who I knew. So it was really about laying the groundwork of that 7 years at studios that really enabled me to take that leap.
That's amazing. And I like how you mentioned that you basically brought your buddies along as well. And it's pretty clear that your network is very important to you. Because you mentioned the course, and obviously we had a podcast with Patrick before. Prior to the podcast, he spoke very highly of you as well. I know you guys are very good friends. So yes, how does it feel like? I guess the key thing is that trust element, right, with the people that you hire.
Yes, it is, and let's touch on this networking thing because it's super important. Please. Let's just do it with Patrick. So, for instance, I worked with a guy named Mike Yazidian. He's now an art director up in Canada. I forget what, I think some Star Wars project. But Mike had moved back to Canada from here. We were good buddies. So Mike said, "Hey, I got a friend coming down from Montreal. He wants to hang out." Oh, cool. His name's Patrick. I had never met Patrick. I said, "Yeah, let's hang out, man." So anyway, Patrick and I met, had a couple beers, had a couple laughs, and we became buds. So then Patrick, I introduced Patrick to Sony because I knew everyone at Sony, and I said, "Oh man, your style is perfect for Sony." I introduced him to Dave Bleish, one of the main guys there at the time. And that's how Patrick got into Sony. So, you know, it's all about networking, and it's that friend network. Help your friend and they'll help you. It's just, I can't say enough about how critical networking is. It's critical.
And is there like because you get this, when people say that, obviously I believe is true. It is definitely true. But there seemed to be a certain energy or a certain approach to it which can kind of seem artificial, where people tend to like, you just get that spiel of like, you know, you can see it's very hollow, with the way people come across.
Yes.
But obviously you mentioned that prior to the recommendations and prior to making the connections with people, it was about getting to know people. But nevertheless, do you feel that there are like certain kind of, maybe tactics is the wrong word to use, but maybe certain kind of behaviors, certain kind of traits that someone needs to have if they really want to succeed in networking?
Totally. And you hit it when you said it might not be so genuine, right? Maybe it's kind of self-serving networking. Your networking needs to be mutual beneficial networking. You need to be fun to hang out with. You need to be funny. You need to buy your friends some beers. You need to, you just need to be an asset, not a liability.
Sure.
And the cooler you are to your buddies, and the nicer you are, and the more cool things you do for and with them, the better off your networking will be, because you'll seem like a genuine person. So if you come across as self-serving, oh, I want to network because I need this, that's it might be effective. But if you come across genuine, hey, I generally want to be a good person and help everyone around me. In a rising tide, all boats rise, right? So that's kind of the mindset and the personality you want to come with. Just be a good person, be genuine, and be fun, right? And the more fun you are, and the cooler you are, the more people want to hang out with you, and the more they'll trust you, and the more they'll stick their neck out for you. Because this is something you need to consider. If you recommend someone for a job, that's your recommendation and your name on the line a little bit. So you need to really trust that person when you recommend them. And I've actually had this backfire on me early on in my career. I recommended some buddies mainly because they were buddies, not because they were the absolute best.
Yeah.
And it didn't reflect good on me when they didn't perform. So this is kind of something just to think about. Like, you want to be genuine. And honestly, I believe if you are genuine, it'll come across. And people, oh, this guy's a nice guy. He's cool. He's fun. I like hanging out with him. He makes me laugh and buys a couple rounds of drinks like everyone else. And it's good. We all get along.
That's amazing. And I think, it's absolutely true. Because at the end of the day, like, there is always that social element, which is just outside of work, which obviously there's, that's just hanging out and, just sharing stories and all that kind of stuff with people. But obviously at the same time, when you're part of an industry, there is that element of, like, obviously you need to earn, you need to get gigs, and the industry that we're in isn't exactly one that just, you tend to get a contract and it lasts forever. They're like, either short term, or you got to pitch yourself for the project that's available, or even force a project through your own pitches and things like that as well. So it's absolutely, you nailed it on the head. And I think even the fact that it is there's a lot of projects happening, but it's still a small industry. So if like you mentioned before, that if maybe someone is recommended and it doesn't go down too well, or someone is basically an obnoxious person, then that can obviously go against you as well, with regards to the network. And like, as I was just going to ask you as well, like, have you had any horror stories regarding that as well? But you obviously mentioned that as well in terms of, like, recommending people and didn't go through. But like, what was so, like, starting off when you first started your company, when you first started working out, what was it like climbing up the ladder for you?
When I first started my company, or first started for other companies? I
guess a bit of both, because they were kind of happening at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, sort of. Well, I did 7 years in the studios first, and I started out. This is actually a good story here. I always wanted to be a concept artist, matte painter, but I never had enough credits to do it because I was a rookie. I'd never worked on anything. So I said, look, I got to get my foot in the door, and I got to get some money. So I'll do texture painting. Texture painting, and not knocking it. It's a beautiful skill. I did it for 2.5, 3 years, but it's not quite as demanding as matte painting. So, but it was much easier for me to get a job. So I said, all right, cool. You know what? I'll start out as a texture painter. It doesn't matter to me. I'll make some contacts. I'll make some money. I can pay off these student loans, and I can eat food and buy beer. Cool. All right, I'm in. So I started out as a texture painter at the very bottom of the texture pile, and I just worked as hard as I could. I took all the overtime I could get, and I did as much networking as I could inside the studio. This was Rhythm and Hues, I think 2002, maybe 2003. I can't remember now. It's been so long.
What were they working on at the time?
This was Chronicles of Riddick, was my first feature film.
Nice.
So, yeah. So, and I started out at the bottom, and then I just kept hanging around. And eventually, funny enough, my first day at Rhythm and Hues, I met the amazing, epic Dylan Cole, like the master of matte painting. And production designer. He set like a couple cubes down for me, and I honestly didn't even know what matte painting was. I just kind of knew environment painting, and I kind of peeked my head in and I saw what he was painting. I'm like, oh my god, this is awesome. I'm like, okay, from this day forward, I'm training for that. And I knew it was going to take years because it's a hard skill to master, because you truly have to master everything, like rendering, lighting, shading, this atmosphere. You have to know the whole spectrum to do matte painting properly. So okay, I'm training. And I literally bought a Cintiq, like it's the day it came out, and I trained at night, all night after work, and just practice. So by the time I had the right network and the right kind of position, I said, okay, cool, I'll just show some matte paintings. And they were, looking back on them now, they're awful. but they got me my first little gig. And actually what it was, I was a texture painter at Sony, at Rhythm and Hues for about 2.5 years. And then I got hired over at Sony to do texture painting on an animated film called Surf's Up. Yep. And I was showing my matte painting work to the texture soup, and he's like, dude, let's try to get you a matte painting. So I got my first matte painting on like a random, okay, let's see what you can do. And I literally worked like, 40 hours, and I billed for like 10. I was like, oh, I'm going to get this thing right. It's going to look awesome. I'm going to make myself look like I know what I'm doing. So this is great. Cool. Come over and join the matte painting team. And that's when I met Dave Bleich, who at the time was a matte painting supervisor at Sony, and he's one of the coolest humans on earth, nicest guy. And Dave kind of guided me. And then I met a couple other great matte painters. A guy named Ivo Horvat was there, and he was the first person I really understand, or I would sit down and show me how to use curves properly. I'm like, oh my God, this is how you do all this editing. Oh, this is it. Now I can do it finally. And that's kind of how I got my start into matte painting from texture painting. So that was the arc of that. It was essentially starting at the bottom, get your foot in the door, be as nice as you can, meet as many people as you can, have as much fun as you can, and be as helpful as you can to the productions, right? And then kind of work your way up to the top. And here's something I should flag while we're at it. In productions, you need to be valuable to the producers. Producers rule productions. And some are incredibly savvy, some are good at the job, some are amazing at their job. And the nicer you are to them, the bigger your network will be, because they're the ones who recommend you for a job. In fact, a producer that I worked with, 12 years ago at Rhythm and Hues, just hired me last week to do a gig. Wow. So that's how, and I haven't talked to her in about 8 years. Amazing. So that's how important your network is, and that's how important it is to be available. If someone says, "Hey, can you work overtime?" Put that hand up. Yes, I will save you, because anytime you suffer for them, they will remember it and make sure, hey, it's totally, I love doing that. Give me the work anytime you need it. Bam. Be nice. Stay in their memory by doing a great job every time, and never forget how small our industry is. I wish someone had told me that actually at the very beginning. I mean, it's not like I burned any major bridges, but I just didn't grasp how small it is, and how the producers talk to one another, and how the artists talk to one another. And if you mess up early on, it's going to follow you until you can autocorrect it, right? So just keep that in mind. Wish someone had really impressed on me how small it really is, right? Because we have a big worldwide community, but it's not as big as you think it is.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
What is it? 6 degrees separation. And obviously in ours, probably like 2 degrees separation.
Yeah, with the internet for sure.
Yeah. So like, obviously you still do matte painting, right? But obviously you do a lot more now. But back then you were doing matte painting. How long, like when, so I like how you mentioned that it's an arc. I think that's a beautiful way to describe it. Because, and obviously you mentioned before that you wanted to be a matte painter, concept artist, and we all have our like certain, I guess, dream roles or dream jobs that we ideally want to do and maybe think that's all we want to do. But nevertheless, and I think it's a philosophy that I hold dear as well, is like, just if there's a job available and you can do it, do it. And I obviously did that with your texture painting. And I like how that progressed into matte painting as well. And like, how did that progress going forward? Like, was there another change that happened after that in terms of a job role or a skill set?
Yeah, totally. So once I was matte painting for a few years, I think I had done like 5 or 6 shows at Sony. And at that point, they asked me if I wanted to be a supervisor, a matte painting supervisor. I said, yeah, sure. That sounds great. Because, when you're, it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, I really want this job until you do it for a few years. And you're like, oh God, that I enjoyed painting way more than supervising. But it was something I really wanted to do. So, I think I did was Matt's supervisor on 5 or 6 shows at Sony, I think one at Rhythm and Hughes. And that was kind of my next trajectory was that, okay, cool. I've done supervising. I know how to run a team and I know how to manage, schedules and projects and all things like that. And immediately after learning those skills, I said, oh man, I can take these skills and run my own shop. And so after my last 3 gigs, or no, I think it was, my last matte painting supervisor role was on Alice in Wonderland. The first one? Yeah, the first one, I think. Yeah. At Sony ImageWorks. And, after that, I was like, look, you know what? I've learned enough skills here to where I can manage my own team. I have enough contacts to hopefully get enough work. And I have enough Rolodex to hire my buddies to help me do these gigs if I get them.
Yeah.
So my next arc from just matte painting was supervising. And that's truly where I learned to run a studio. Now, could I be more efficient? Totally. Like there's people out there who are amazing at running a studio and being an artist. Yeah. But one thing you have to think about is I am an artist. I'm not a producer. But every single day running a studio, I'm a producer. So I spend a portion of my day doing something I'm not great at, which is producing and scheduling. But I'm good at it, but I'm not like the best. Yeah. But that's something to also think about. If you're freelance, you're going to have to be a producer as well. And if you run even a small studio, you're going to need to be a producer as well. So it will be invaluable to you to have a supervisor experience, or even be a coordinator somewhere, something like that, because you'll learn a ton how to schedule, how to bid, and all this stuff. And this is actually bidding is a big one. We should touch on this for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Because when I was a matte painting supervisor, I would go into meetings and we would bid sequences. So we would look at an animatic or a storyboard. And I would have to say, okay, this matte painting is going to take X amount of time. This will take X amount of time. Oh, we can reuse pieces of that for this over here. So we'll save a little bit of time. So it's this scheduling stuff that is super scary to do on your own dime. So you're better off to learn it on someone else's. Because let's say, let's say I was wrong at Sony. Well, it cost Sony a little extra money, not me.
Yeah.
No, not that you want to do that. You want to save Sony as much money as you can. Trust me. But it was mistakes when you have a little support, because when I make those mistakes on my own in my own studio, it's very costly, because
for sure.
there's not a massive profit margin in this. You're not like, oh, I got an extra 50 grand left over. No, it's like, okay, I did it for just the amount of money that I bid it at, or I've actually lost a few bucks. So bidding was a big one, and it was super scary at first. Like, oh my God, how do I bid? I don't know what this needs to be. So it's really hard and it's really scary. But now I don't even think about it. Oh yeah, this is going to take me this amount of time. Okay, I've done it. And I've done it so much now that bidding is just, I do a little honest estimate. Here's what it's going to take. And I know how much to pad for error. Sure. Right. And okay, I need to pad this much for the unexpected, the known unknowns. You have to pad for that.
And how long did sorry to interrupt. How long did it take for you to get to that point?
Let's see. I was Matt Soup, I think, on 5 shows, and that really taught me. I really learned trial by fire on the first one, and I was even, I was very clear with my producer. Look, I've never bid before. I'll give you my bids, but let me check in with the other show Soup, who was, I think, Dave Blythe at the time.
Yeah.
So I said, hey Dave, what do you think about my numbers? I wasn't too far off, and Dave taught me how to add for pad. So you got to add padding. What you're doing is you're expecting this to go good. But it's not. You're going to have a problem. Something's going to happen. So you always need to add the pad. And adding the padding is just, you need to know what that number is. And that kind of depends on how big the budget is, how many variables are in it. And that's hard to get a head wrapped around. But I think after a couple shows under my belt, I felt pretty comfortable. Now, was I super nervous bidding my first projects at my own studio? Oh my God, yes. And did I mess up a few times? Totally. But I would rarely mess up on the side of hurting the client. I would usually err on the side of hurting myself, especially because I was a new studio. And I also wanted to, so, because if I was the expensive guy, well, they might as well just go overseas and take the tax incentive. So, it's one of those things I just had to find a good balance. Exactly. And once I got that balance down, I became a little more comfortable. And now I'm pretty comfortable bidding most things, just because I've kind of been through the ringer. And, and that's kind of where I went from supervisor to owning my studio. And then after I owned my studio a few years, I was art director for J.J. Abrams on Star Wars and Star Trek and a couple other things. And that was a whole different learning experience. and a whole nother level up that, now I take that knowledge and I apply it to my studio now, and I'm twice as effective, right?
In what way would you say it was a whole different learning experience?
Well, Bad Robot is an amazing production studio with the coolest people in the world. And at that time, the coolest movie in the world was being made there, of Star Wars, right? Sure. And this is episode 7, like before anyone knew any of the madness that went down with 8 and 9. Like 7 was so cool at the time. Like, oh my God, this is going to be the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Oh
my God. And the pressure was high. So this is probably a good story to tell. Anytime I see a great networking story, I'm going to flag it because everybody needs to hear this.
Please.
So one of my buddies from college needed a gig. I got him a gig at Rhythm and Hughes, and we kind of didn't talk all that much over the years. He had a couple of kids, and life gets busy. So about 8 years later, something like that, maybe 5. He says, "Hey man, you want to work on Star Trek for Bad Robot?" I said, "Oh, cool. It's a theme ride." "Oh yeah, great. I'll do a little theme ride." So this is literally like the week that they announced that JJ was going to do Star Wars, right? So I went in there being like, "Hey, you know what?" I was like, "I'll do this Star Trek gig for almost free. All I want is to be top of the pile for when you guys start picking art direction."
Yeah.
It's like, dude, Don, you said you're already top of the pile right now for that attitude, buddy. So quite literally, me being flexible and understanding the value of what that could have been, I reduced my value of what I got paid for this one gig. And I also made the producer look great because his budget was way down because I worked for cheap just for the access to get into this Star Wars gig. Right. So it was me getting a buddy a job who turned around offering me a job that got me the eventual art director gigs at Star Wars for JJ.
Wow.
So that kind of explains the networking angle, and also like the, being savvy angle. I know if I make this guy look good, he'll look fondly on me. Boom, boom, boom. Bob's your uncle, right?
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of how I got into that. And that kind of brings me through the networking part of that. I think it's just it's interesting to hear because I couldn't believe it at the time how it happened. I'm like, oh man, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So this is why you're nice and have good buddies and all that good stuff, because it truly pays off.
Yeah.
So, but at the time, Bad Robot was just like the place to be. There were, I've never seen so many celebrities in my life because I was art director there for a year and a half, and I was in there every day. And oh my God, there was just like every single person in the world came in there. I saw Harrison Ford, obviously. Wow. There's no end to the celebrities that would come through there. So just the vibe alone was like, oh my God, this is wild.
Yeah.
Right. And like they had the best food and like the best environment. And there were JJ and his wife are the most awesome people on earth. I cannot say enough amazing things about them. They're the coolest. And just the whole experience was just rad. But it was a whole different world than, being a Matt Soup and running my own studio.
Yeah.
Just because, there's a lot of politics involved because it's high power everything.
Right.
There's amazing amounts of security because of, Star Wars. Like no one knew anything. I was working on sequences. I didn't even know where it was. I was working on what ended up being where Daisy is from, whatever desert planet that is. I forget the name of it now.
Jakku,
but I thought it was, it's Jakku. I thought it was Tatooine because no one would tell me. Like, it's just a desert planet. Man, cool, they're back on Tatooine. No worries. I didn't know that's how tight they were keeping the script, right? And it was a neat. Even though I was an art director on it, it's like you don't need to know anything, but here's what it needs to look like. Here's the vibe. Give us some vibe. All right, cool, man. So it's just a whole different world. It was definitely the coolest experience of my career. It was just an awesome place to be, the nicest people, and at that time, man, Star Wars was. I was a huge fan, and it's a dream come true. Definitely moments where I'd wake up and being like, "Okay, was this whole thing a dream? Was that real? Oh my God, it's real. Okay, cool. Let's go to work."
Did that, like, being a fan of Star Wars and obviously having an influence, especially on the fact that it was Episode 7, it was, like, is bringing Star Wars back because everyone thought that there's no more films happening ever again. Like, how did that affect your approach? Did it affect it much? Or was it just more like it gave you more energy, more impetus, or higher threshold to like crunch and working hard? Or did it actually, would you say, give you an extra boost?
It definitely gave me a huge boost. It would definitely, there was a lot of pressure. Like I felt like the whole world was watching, and So there was a lot of pressure, but there was also a lot of like passion. Like I would come into work early and leave late. I was just loving it. I was working as hard as I could and doing as much as I could because I knew every inch I put or every ounce I put in was a pound out.
Yes.
Right. So just jam. And there was a lot of pressure. I felt like the whole world was watching, especially because a lot of my buddies were like, also Star Wars fans because I work in visual effects. Duh.
Yeah. Of
So
course, yeah.
they're like, dude, tell me. I can't tell you anything, bro. I can't say anything. And they're like, and it was just a lot of pressure. And I remember when that first trailer come out, I had not even seen the trailer. That's how tight it was. I had some shots in it.
Yeah.
But I had not even seen the whole thing. They were just being super secretive about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember the debut of the trailer, we were all sitting downstairs watching all together for the first time ever. Like half the studio had never seen it. Yeah. And half the artists working on it had never seen it. We're just like, oh my God, let's watch it together. And it came out and we were freaking out. And it was just the coolest. That's probably one of the coolest moments of my career. But then as soon as that happened, I felt, oh my God, this is real. And the pressure, we got to deliver. It's got to be the best work ever. And the pressure was on, man. It was something like I've never experienced ever. I mean, I've worked on a lot of big films, but nothing quite like that, simply because of the time. Like it was the first one of the set. It had been 15 years since one had been out. And you're in there seeing all these amazing celebrities, and the famous Roger Dean came in. There was so many amazing artists and talent that would just come through there. It's like, I'm an ant among these gods here. This is so awesome.
That's crazy.
It was definitely a rad experience.
And what was like the rest of the team like? Did you kind of get the same kind of vibe and energy from everybody else? Like they were kind of in the same shoes as you?
Totally. It was so many pinch me moments all the time. Like, dude, are we actually doing this? And one of my good buddies, Lindsay, she made the sounds for BB-8. And she was like, I had really no clue how big this was going to be. I was just making these cool little sounds for JJ. And JJ's like, oh, cool, we're going to use this for BB-8. It's wicked. Like, what?
Wicked. And how hands-on was like JJ? I'm a bit of a fan of JJ since like even Lost Days, and from there on in. What was he? I know you mentioned that obviously he was great to work for. Because obviously Bad Robot is his production company, right?
Correct.
And so like, what was he like to work for?
The absolute best. I've never had a cooler, more awesome boss, and just the way him and his wife Katie ran that studio, just amazing. Just the coolest vibe ever. And honestly, kind of during the shooting of Star Wars, he wasn't there all that much because he was all over the world shooting, right?
Yeah.
But he would be back in there every week or so, and he was just so nice, so approachable. And one time I thought I was going to pass out. He was like, "Hey man, can you show me how you're using this keyshot renderer?" I was like, "You use 3D?" He's he's 3D all the time. I'm like, oh my God. I literally thought I was going to black out. I'm like, cool, I'll show you a keyshot. No worries, bud.
That's crazy.
He's just that cool. And like, I think it's, he likes to do visual effects work. He's a big VFX guy. Yeah. So I think he does like one shot on every film he does or something like that. Like he's very involved in the process. He's incredibly talented and just one of the coolest dudes ever.
There's like, from what I know of his career, are you familiar with the composer Michael Giacchino? I think I pronounced his name right. He did the score to like Incredibles, and he mainly does the scores for most of JJ's films, except Star Wars. He did like this concert brought out back in London a few years back, and JJ was on stage celebrating all that kind of stuff, and they talked a lot about their childhood. And what you just mentioned there kind of tallies up with how they were speaking about it. They just seemed like us, but they're just a bit older, they're much further on down the path, because they love films, they love to create, and of the fact that you mentioned that he's into keyshot and does VFX stuff in his films, that's just great to hear. And I think that's a really neat little bit of trivia.
Yeah, and it just shows you how sophisticated the man is. Like he knows every inch of his film. Like he knows why the VFX need to be like this. He knows why the audio needs to be like that. He's just a pro.
Yeah. And I think that's, I guess, like, even just generally as, like, creators, whatever field we work in, knowing a bit of everything or knowing how you can benefit the pipeline will help you with your work generally anyway. Because you know where, okay, that's not going to even help that person down the line, so I can just save that time and not even bother with that. Or maybe the opposite, so working a bit extra on this will help things further on down the line. I think you obviously mentioned the course as well, like on Orville, because you work a lot in 3D now. that you can just send the 3D sets over and they'll literally go and build it?
Yep. Yeah. Orville was probably where I really fine-tuned the workflow that I'm using on this course, actually. So I was a visual effects art director. Well, I guess I still am on production shut down now. So I'm a visual effects art director on Orville season 3. And basically the VFX soup, this artist named Brandon Fayette, awesome dude, and from Bad Robot as well. So cool. Boom Networking, what's up? So Brandon is a super talented guy, and he's very, very 3D heavy. Like, dude knows every software in the world somehow. Nice. He's just super smart. So his whole approach was, hey man, let's design everything in 3D as much as we can without, spending time modeling crap we don't need to. Let's do these 3D designs, because not only can we then use them for the animatics, which they did, then we can also hand these off to the set guys, right? So when I was working at Fox, I was on the Fox lot, and we were basically interfacing with the production design side. So I was VFX art director, and there was other art directors for the production side. Yeah. So essentially, they would they would sometimes build a set, and then I would go look at the set, and I would be responsible for how the visual effects ties into their physical set. So, and on the other hand, I would design visual effects sets, and then I would make sure that whatever I built, they were going to be able to tie into that. So sometimes they would build it first, sometimes I would build it first. But no matter what we did, we were always interfacing with one another to make sure that we would sync up. So, and like sometimes if I was designing a doorway, like, hey man, our doorways look like this. Boom, no worries, give me your CAD model. Yep. They would hand me a CAD model over, I'd bring it into Maya, pop it in my scene, boom, we're in. Nice. So that's one of the big benefits of doing things in 3D. Now, this couldn't really be possible if 3D hasn't advanced so much. And my big thing with 3D now is it's an assets game. It's about getting the assets, getting the kits, getting all these resources, so you don't have to spend time building it, because it takes a while. So that's kind of what allowed us to hit this new production workflow where everything was kind of 3D based. Like, we would do rough thumbnail sketches, and okay, boom, our VFX soup would say, here's a sketch, here's what I like. Now give me the same framing ballpark in 3D, and then we'll play with the camera. Yeah. So instead of like, if you're doing a sketch in 2D, once you get your composition, that's it. You're stuck. Now in 3D, you do a basic layout. Here's my camera, here's my dude, here's the background, here's the doorway, boom, whatever. And you just block it out with primitives. Okay, cool, I like that. And then your VFX soup can go and choose the camera angle. Okay, boom, here's my camera angle, done. And then I start to paint from there. So it really frees you up, and you can kind of get there faster than ever now because, the asset game. Yeah. And like, we would even build sets, and then Seth would go through and pick his own camera. Cool, here's the 3D camera I like, bam. And, and soon all productions will be virtual soon. It's coming. Unreal and Unity will change the game. And I recommend to any students listening to this right now, get on the Unreal Unity tip, because it will change everything. And this is something that's really important, because productions will be all 3D very soon. And because you're going to need the sets built before they start to shoot, this is a game changer, because it used to be you'd shoot the footage and then someone would go and build the virtual set and put it behind it. Yeah. Well, now that they're shooting in virtual production, these sets got to be built first, right? Because you need it. You need the 3D there to shoot your virtual stuff. Otherwise, you're just looking at nothing, cubes or whatever, right? So this has totally changed the approach on how these things are geared, because you're going to need to have the 3D before you start to shoot. Even if it's primitive 3D, it doesn't matter. It can be evolved cubes and some kits and things like that, but it needs to be there so that way you can get it on set. Your director can choose the camera. Your DP can get the lens he wants to use. And if we build this in real world, how do we even get a camera with a lens long enough in the set? It might not be possible. Yeah. So there's just things like that you can start to figure out in 3D, where it's really hard to do in 2D. I mean, I'm not saying you can't, but you can. It's just super fast now, because the 3D games, it's changed, man. For sure. I've seen it go from super frustrating polymodeling to I can bust out an entire scene in a day. Yeah. So
I think it's mad with the advancements, and you literally nailed it on the head. I think The Mandalorian is the best example in terms of like the one that, like in terms of popularity, where they showed that how they use Unreal to literally film their whole entire show and build it in advance, as opposed to the opposite way, which was like green screen and then plunk things in afterwards. But I think like, because you did some work on Oblivion, is that correct?
I did.
That was one of the films I think I don't know if it did it first, but it did something similar as well in terms of like had the actual light projection, like projection screens on either side, and then shot the real settings on to the set. So you'd have to rotoscope and all that kind of stuff as well. And maybe even like with Avatar, more like on the exploring the like especially a CGI landscape or CGI setting. The director can explore it without actually having to wait for the artist to build it and then figure their shots out that way too. It's kind of all coalesced and come to this point where it can be done so easily now. How much or how long have you been messing around with Unreal?
I have only poked around in Unreal and Unity. It's on my list to be learning.
Yeah.
I know it's. I've done just the basic glance. Okay, here's how it works. Here's what I need to do. Okay, cool. But I know that it's coming, and I know that it's on my list. I'm going to have to learn. Currently, I'm mostly learning Blender and Clarice. But I know that it's coming. There's no way to avoid it.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just going to be the future. And we won't be rendering either very soon. It'll all be real time stuff. It's just going to happen. So this is why I'm so focused on the 3D side of things, because it's going to change. It's getting easier. I mean, I've literally seen it go from where you couldn't even get ray tracing renders or real time reflections or reflections period to like now I can get all this stuff with like a couple good video cards. I can scream in the stuff,
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah.
And Blender, how are you? Obviously, that's like another hot one right now, purely because it's free and not even that, it's very powerful. You've been in 3D
awesome.
for a long time. I'm sure you remember back in the day when it used to almost be a bit comical, a bit like a bit of a joke, because it was very inaccessible and it was almost like, what is this compared to all the other softwares out there? But now look at it, it's a lot of people are switching. I'm trying to make the switch. Have you made the switch yet?
I've started to. I've gotten about I'll probably always use Maya or something similar to stage my scenes, but Blender for modeling, there's no better package right now. I was using Moy 3D for a little bit for my hard surface stuff, but there's nothing I can do in Moy that I can't do in Blender. So far that I've seen anyway. There could be some stuff, but Blender so far is for sure the best modeling. I haven't learned Blender as far as materials and rendering goes. I've just done models and I've kicked them out to my current pipe. But that's kind of why I'm learning it. Like the modeling tools are amazing. I've seen Jama release some stuff recently that I'm like, oh my God, look at these new plugins. Like these new tools are amazing. You can draw like that. So pretty much as soon as we finish this podcast today, I'm going to go get his new tool, the new sketch tool. I'm going to try this thing out because, oh my God, I saw him make that robot yesterday. I'm like, what? Exactly. That is awesome.
And it's like, what, before you'd want to maybe do that in maybe a different software than bring it in. I use Maya myself, and Maya's almost like, and I think it's similar with yourself too. It's more like a workbench. You bring everything in there, assemble it, and then get your shots in and do what you got to do afterwards as well. And Blender can kind of do almost all of that in one place with very few extra third-party plugins and stuff. And you mentioned Unreal as well, where you might need to render anymore. I'm sure you obviously seen that Unreal PlayStation demo that it was rendered on like 55,000 GPUs or something. But it was working in real time. And I guess we always kind of hoped that, but never thought it'd ever happen in our lifetime. And now it's literally around the corner. Obviously you've been familiar with 3D. You've made the jump when required to different disciplines or different workflows. You've adapted essentially. Do you have, because there might be some people out there that find it not just difficult, but even maybe annoying and just a bit of a disruption to keep constantly, they've only just figured out maybe Maya or maybe something else, and then now they've got to change to this. Whereas you've successfully switched from one thing to the next, and even not just softwares, but disciplines as well. Do you have maybe any tips, or is there something that that there's a certain process you go through that helps you with that? Or is it kind of more just, you just go all in and then wait until you can kind of figure it out?
Yep. There's a few answers to that, but I think the most honest one and the one that struck me the most and left the most lasting impact on me is when I started out kind of matte painting world when there were still some older guys in it who were the traditional matte painters who kind of just barely knew Photoshop, and they were amazing painters. I could not even touch a brush and get anything to come out like what these guys did. I could not. Like, they're hands down a million times better painters than me, right? But they did not catch the Photoshop train. And they got hired less and less and less and less. And I would never see them hired anymore. Oh, do you know 3D? Oh, I don't know any 3D at all. I'm not going to learn that. So that alone of seeing people who are more talented than me get washed out because of them not staying with the skills is the fire that fuels me to learn this new stuff, because I've seen them get washed out. They're more talented than me. How did this happen? This guy's awesome. He can crush me in painting, but he just didn't know Photoshop that well. He didn't understand how to keep his reference library high. So he never had the great photos to make the matte paintings fast with. And, and they would try to paint a lot of things versus relying on photo assets and getting it done twice as fast. So that alone was enough to teach me, like back in the day when I first started, I'm like, oh my God, if I don't stay on top of this new changes, then I'm not going to be relevant, and I'll slowly, lose my gig. And this is also another reason why I look at what some of the younger students are doing. And then I see all these kids using Blender. I'm like, done. I'm using Blender. I've seen what they've done. It looks awesome, and I'm going to stay on it. Now, is it frustrating? Oh my God, totally frustrating. But it's just part of the gig. So like for me, I think, if you spend, 40 hours a week working on your current set of software, you should probably spend about 2 learning something new. Like, hey, let me check out Blender. I'll do an hour here, hour there, boom, boom, boom. Just kind of watch a tutorial, learn something, see how they're doing it, and just try to make sure you stay ahead of the curve, because it's kind of like, I don't know if you know a lot about surfing, but if you're on the wrong side of that wave when it breaks, you're hammered. If you're on the right side, you're catching the wave of your life, right? So it's just about being at the right place on that wave. Don't be too far on the front. Don't be too far on the back. You got to be at the right spot, and you got to see the momentum, see what's coming. And don't be afraid to put the work in, because like I said, I've seen people more talented than me get watched out.
Wow. Yep. Perfectly said.
I don't know if that's scary enough to some people, but I mean, it's kind of the truth. It's what motivates me. Like I want to work, right? And the one way to do it is to make sure you stay up on the tech, because the tech makes our jobs easier. Had I not like learn to have a massive asset library, I couldn't do the images I do in the time that I do. There's no way.
Yeah, precisely. I think it depends on what angle you're coming from. But if it's a case of you want to get employed, you want work, then you have to go with where the industry is going, and you have to not even just that, but if the directors, like you mentioned, want this done or seen in a certain way, then you kind of want to need to do that as well. Even to the point where, let's say, directors now expect things to be shown in 3D as a standard, then it makes sense to even know that. Whereas, like, say, maybe it's a hobbyist angle, or you're just a complete outlier at something where you can do any kind of brief or solve any kind of brief in just pencil and paper, then fair enough. But I think, it's the fact that because it's a profession, you have to go with the way things change. I mean, like, even different industries, when Nokia kind of got just wiped out by Apple because they didn't adapt at that time, or Kodak's another perfect example, who didn't adapt when the industry changed. And even though this is not on that same kind of scale, like you mentioned, it's something very similar also.
Yep.
So go ahead.
It's definitely good for students to keep your eyes on that, and not just students, like professionals. As you progress, keep your eye on what the kids are doing, because they're doing it in school. They're training all day. They're using the newest stuff. And just keep your eye out. Like, you should be aware of your surroundings in all stages of life, especially in your career.
Yeah. In terms of, like, what would you like to see next, or what things would make your life easier, your job easier? What would you like to see next in terms of advancements and developments?
Like I said, I think one of the biggest advancements in 3D is going to be the assets. That's why, like, the Kit Bash guys, Max Berman and Banks Boutique, they got their finger on that pulse, man. Max is brilliant. He saw what was up. He made the move, and I was like, oh my God, this is the best idea.
Yes.
So it's this kind of thing that's going to make our job easier. Now, granted, there's some throwbacks with kits, right? You need to use them properly. You need to use them and blend them in a way where you're tweaking them, modifying them, so you're not just getting a straight building that that they have. But that I think is the biggest advancement in 3D is assets and libraries, because I think a lot of what we'll do in the future is we'll be doing a lot of staging. Like we'll be, okay, let me get a building here, street here, person here, boom. Okay, now I got the variables, I got the shot, I got the lighting. Okay, now let's tweak the character, tweak the building, tweak the set, which is a lot of what I do in my course. I'll use kits to block out the set, and then we tweak it and we add our own little flares to it. Now, could I do the same thing if I modeled every single piece? Totally, but it would take me forever, and I'd probably never do it because the amount of work is daunting. Yeah. So, so for me, the 3D game is about assets moving forward, and I think the software will complement this. And that being said, this is where I think Unity and Unreal are going to really shine, because you're going to be importing kit bash assets in there and things like that. Now, can you go in there and model and tweak? Not just yet, but that will happen soon enough. Don't worry. Yeah. And so currently, I think what I would like to see is a better asset manager. And I'm learning Clarice for that. I learned it with doing some training with Weta. And Clarice is amazing. It's just a little pricey. Yeah. So but the way that it handles assets is beautiful. Like you're instancing everything. The instancing in Clarice is mind-numbingly amazing. Oh my God, how do you get 6 billion trees with no hardware lag? Yeah. So I think that's what we're going to see next is a bigger sandbox, like a cooler sandbox. It's a real-time sandbox, real-time assets, already pre-staged. Like Megascans is killing it, right? Their stuff is really cool. So and I've seen people build. I watched some dude. He does build this scene in Unity and Megascans in an hour. I'm like, shut up. And I watched it. I'm like, oh my God, you did that in an hour? Like, whoa, cool. Okay, I got to get this down. So that's what I see being the biggest advancements coming our way. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean you're not going to be creative anymore. You're going to start out with these sets and design your own little worlds and paint on top and be creative. So it's not like, I don't think some people are like, oh, kits are just going to stifle creativity. Nah, man. You're looking at it wrong. They're just going to enable your creativity.
100%.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you nailed it then. And I was going to segue into the next question, I guess. It's like, so in terms of the technical side of things, that's kind of going to be taken care of for you, because obviously the assets are going to be top notch. They already are, to be fair. Obviously it's only going to get better. So what should artists, especially from the angle, obviously concept artists, map painters and things like that, what should they be focusing on then that obviously they can control in terms of make themselves stand out? So in terms of assets, anybody can buy the asset technically, but what can somebody do to be like, well, but you need me for this because etc. etc. What do you think that is?
Well, I think the most important thing for people to do is find what skill set you like the best, because just because, you could be one of the guys building these assets, or one of the girls building these assets, right? So if you love modeling, boom, focus on modeling and be one of the awesome people who give us these cool assets. We love you, right? So now if you're one of the guys who wants to do concept work and you want to, stage a lot of scenes, I love staging scenes. I love setting narrative. It's one of my favorite things. That's kind of what I've been focusing on, is setting narratives with these tools. Yeah. And I think it's going to be different for each artist, and I think it's going to be catered to each of their skill sets. Right. Let's say, for instance, Patrick O'Keefe, 2D sequence illustration course, amazing. Check it out. Yeah. His 3D workflow is absolutely brilliant. He did a Spider-Man interior. He just mocked it up with cubes. Boop, boop, boop. Yep. I got the perspective, no problem, and paint on top. That is all the 3D he needs to know. Period. Mm-hmm. But it's awesome that he knows that little bit of 3D, because now he can hand off that set that he did with just cubes to the modeling team, and boom, now they're modeling this thing from his actual footprint, right? Yeah. So, but it's not worth his time to dig deeper in 3D, because that's all he needs it for. Yeah. So this is what I'm saying. Each artist will need to find their path and cater their skill set to that kind of, right? Yes. So I think that's one of the great things about the changing industry is it's so dynamic that you can kind of forge your own path. If you like doing just storyboards, no problem. Just stay in 2D and storyboard. Awesome. And the storyboarding tools will even get better as 2D evolves, right? Yeah. But 3D is changing in such a way that you don't need to say, oh, well, if it's just assets and I'm just staging scenes, that's all I ever do. No, man, build the assets. And you can also just be a beautiful lighter. If you really understand cinematic lighting, that's your niche. I want to do lighting. I want to do cinematic lighting. I love lighting in movie Drive. Let's just watch this and make some scenes like that. So it really depends on where your passion is. And that's something I think each person it takes time to find your passion, right? It takes time to find your path. When I first started in college, I wanted to do modeling. I loved it. I was modeling all the time. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Now, was it frustrating as I was pushing polys? Yeah, totally. But I liked it. I thought it was really fun. But that's before I really understood what concept art and environment painting was. So then I'm like, oh, cool. I can take all these modeling skills that I've learned, tweak them into environment painting, and then tweak those into concept painting, right? I hope that answered your question. I know it's kind of rambling.
100%. No, 100%. It said it perfectly. And I guess it's like, to summarize, it's about keeping an open mind, because you don't know how, like, you might be, again, good at one thing, but then you could be even better at something that you weren't even aware of. So always give something a try. And
totally.
Also, it's like, it is like kind of like a martial art. Like, you can get to black belt, but that's, like we said before, that's the beginning. So always constantly perfect your craft. And that boils down to put in the time, hard work, and effort you mentioned before as well. So, one of the key things is if you could just basically dedicate that time to what you need to do. And I just want to go back to assets. Obviously, we mentioned the Kitbash 3D guys. Love those guys too. But you make your own as well.
Yes, I do.
Terrain Domain, right?
Yep. My buddy Zach Mant and I started a company a few years ago where we take our drones and fly them around cool terrain and capture them using photogrammetry. And then we spit these assets out and put them on our site, theterraindomain.com. Yep. So that was a really fun way it started. Like, I had taken a trip to Iceland with my daughter and was just shooting a ton of photographs and flew a ton of drones and, shot some cool drone footage. And I didn't even know what photogrammetry was. And I posted a clip. Some dude was like, hey, man, you should pop that through reality capture. I'm like, what's that? And I piped cool, this looks pretty rad. I piped my footage through and I'm like, oh my God, I got a 3D asset now. Wow. What? And I immediately, okay, let's book another trip to Iceland. Let's go back. And my buddy Zach and I went and we just flew drones everywhere, caused a lot of mayhem, and it was awesome. This is why it's not just, you don't need to do just one thing, right? Yes. If you're really passionate about flying a drone and shooting photography, go do some photogrammetry, scan these things. We'll sell them for you, or Mega Scans will buy them from you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So the awesome thing about our technology, it doesn't limit us to being a simple artist. We can be Renaissance artists, right? We can do a little bit of everything because the tech is just so cool right now.
Yes. That's amazing. How many places have you been so far with Terrain Domain? Like, have you been to Iceland? Do you go country at a time, or do you scout in advance? Like, what's your process behind that?
Yeah. Being a matte painter and scrolling through everybody's vacation photos for the past 2 decades to get photo reference, I kind of mapped out all the stuff already. I'm like, oh, cool. Got to go here. Got to go here. Boom, boom, boom. So once we started this, I'm like, dude, we got 1,000 places already queued up to go. And, we kind of just will travel wherever we can. That's the cheapest we can and get there and go. But, there's some restrictions now. Some places you can't fly drones, obviously. Yeah. But we have been to Iceland. We've been a couple places in Spain. We were about to go to the Canary Islands, but COVID happened. We've been all over California, the desert out here, Utah, Arizona. So a lot of U.S. places, obviously, because, we're local here. And then Canary Islands is one we were going to hit, and there's another one. Oh, Australia as well.
Cool. How do you manage all of these things?
Coffee.
Okay.
No, it's, it's honestly, it's part passion, part fiscal, right? Like, I really enjoy, my favorite part of doing the terrain domain and photogrammetry is being there. It's definitely not processing the scans, because that's a little painful, because you end up with the 8 terabyte model you got to then clean. not the funnest thing on earth. Right. But I absolutely love being out in the wilderness, like just going out and taking these photos and, roughing it a little bit. And because you're with a buddy, it's even more fun. You're laughing, you're having a couple of drinks, getting silly, it's just good times. So that part pays for itself as far as the experience goes. But managing, I have a couple of companies, a house, daughter, life, all this sort of stuff. It can get a little tedious, but that's why I work hard, but I play hard too. So I think that's my secret, is work hard, play hard.
Got it. And what kind of things do you like playing? That
What kind of
keep
things
you
do I like
sane?
playing?
Yeah, that keep you sane.
Well, drinking's one of them. Yeah, I just try to get out. Like I do a lot of, I'm ever since COVID started. Actually, I've been camping every weekend, just getting
Oh,
out of the
nice.
city, getting out in the wilderness, just being out, laughing with your buddies. Like to me, laughter is the best medicine.
For sure.
Anytime I'm sick, I
Yeah.
pop a comedy on and laugh. That solves most of my problems right there.
Yeah.
It just not being in front of a computer is a blessing when you're in front of it 12 hours a day. It's like, oh, great, let's just get out and
Yeah.
kind of regroup. I recommend to every single person who listens to this, work out every day. I know it sounds cheesy. You don't not like meathead workout. Just get your body moving. It can totally recalibrate your brain, get oxygen in your blood. It's so healthy. I didn't do it for the first decade of my career, and I suffered from it. I was always needing coffee. I was struggling. It was unhealthy, and it's one of the first, as soon as I started working out daily, boom, my life changed.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds cheesy, but if our job is sitting down in front of a computer, you need to work out, because not just for your physical look, just for your mind.
100%. Yeah, even more so for your mind. Physically, it's great, but the mind seems to need it more than actual.
Oh my God,
limbs and stuff. I've had a similar journey to yourself in terms of like being inactive for a prolonged amount of time and almost putting so much energy into work and stuff. You think, yeah, that's what I need to do, and you just kind of put it to one side, thinking that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. But then it kind of goes full circle when you kind of feel like you're running through treacle, I guess, or you just like you're kind of hitting brick walls and getting burnt out really quickly. And then adding activity just helps you break down all those barriers. And I guess it helps with frustration as well, because as artists, when you can't get stuff done, we just get super agitated and super frustrated. Working out and kind of being physically tired kind of just gives you no energy to be frustrated. So it definitely helps out in that regard.
Yep. Yeah. And this is not a workout podcast, obviously, but I think it's worth saying it, because I really wish someone had told me that at the beginning of my career.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you're going to be chilling at your desk. I actually stand and work. I don't sit at all. So that helps, but I'm still at my desk, stuck looking at a computer, and like, you get a little frustrated, go run, go do a couple sets. And you're like, oh man, what was I mad about? I don't know, but I got oxygen in my blood. My brain's good. I'm not upset anymore. Let's jam. Right. So I do that anytime I hit a wall. I take a little break, walk the dogs, run, do some sit-ups, whatever. Just get your body moving and get your mind. Yeah, just get your mind off what was making you frustrated, because our jobs require us to be sediment, or still sitting in a place, not moving, staring at a screen, and sometimes a dark room around other people who are doing the same thing. So you really need to do it.
And it's unless you work in the studio, it's like an isolated job as well. So you don't even get that human interaction sometimes also. So getting out, interacting, or doing those kind of things that help you unwind, super, super helpful. What caused you, or what triggered to make you want to stand and work? Was it like a recommendation, a bit of research, or was it actually something that brought it on?
It's probably a combination of things. I think my first desk that I got at Rhythm and Hughes was actually one of the tall desks.
Right.
But they didn't have it tall. They had it all sitting down on the ground. Yeah. And I said, hey, can I just jack this thing up? Security's like, well, we don't have a chair. Systems like, oh, we don't have a chair for you. I'm like, I don't care. I just want to stand. Let's do it. And ever since I did that, I felt totally in control. Because when you're sitting down, it's like, oh, I don't want to get up to get water, or I don't want to get up to do this. I'm comfortable. No, stand and just jam. It works for me. It might not be for everyone, but here's another thing. Like especially if you're freelance, you're going to be working long hours, and you don't want to be sitting down, hunched over your machine for that long. Now, if you have awesome posture, that's totally fine. But if you're going to be hunched over for 12 hours a day for your entire career, think about your spine in 20 years. Right, it's not going to be good. Yeah. And there, depending on if you're freelance, you might not have insurance. That's going to help you solve that problem when you get older. So you got to be conscious of your body's health while you do this slightly unhealthy job. Right. And I know standing is not for everyone, but I have a tall chair. If I kind of like a stool, I can kind of like take a little break, sit down. But it also just makes me free. I don't feel attached to my desk. I don't feel captured. By my machine. I feel like I'm in control, and that's all mental. So maybe it's just in my mind, but it works for me, and I've never gone back. I've been standing probably about over 15 years, something like that, and working.
Yeah, I think getting away from the computer is key as well. Even finding ways to still work and not be at your computer. I've found that very frustrating, especially this year, where I was just thinking like, I just want to get out of this particular corner, but I got this to do, and I can only do it on this particular machine. I got like a tablet recently, so I can't do the same things, but I can do different things. So that enables me to obviously be downstairs and just be out of this kind of zone. So yeah, any kind of strategy you can have. I think it's key as well. It's like just figure out some kind of strategy where you can kind of change things up a little bit, but still be productive.
Totally. And I have a very simple one, and this is not going to solve all your problems, but it's so easy to do. Whatever glass of liquid you have in your room, make it super, super small. Like just put a tiny bit of water in your cup. So every 15 minutes, you're getting away from your computer.
Yeah.
Even if it's for 1 minute, right? Just step away from your computer and go get a glass of water, or go get a couple sips of water, come back to your desk. Don't bring a full glass because you'll sit there for an hour with a full glass, right?
Great tip.
And it's not like you're not working. I'm giving my eyes a break from that screen that's blasting me with light all day. Now, it's a funny story with this. Be careful doing this at a studio because I actually got fussed at. I see Nick walk by the water cooler.
Hello.
A little bit of water in the glass so I can give my eyes a 1 minute break every 15 minutes. Right. And trust me, if you're an artist, you might need those eyes.
Oh, yeah.
So you probably want to give them a little break.
Yep. Totally. I mean, like the amount of horror stories I've heard of people have like just horrific illnesses and injuries and physical pains. And, here some artists, I think I heard of some manga artists, I'm not sure which ones, that actually ended up having really bad illnesses and dying almost from their craft. It's just like crazy to hear. Something that we love to do, we love to consume, but the fact that it can actually really damage you, you need to take heed of that and find some kind of strategy. But we've all done it. We've all been there where we think, tomorrow I'll figure it out and I just got to keep working on this. But it's key to being organized. Speaking of like organized, do you use any kind of like apps or tools or softwares? And obviously you mentioned that you do a lot of things anyway, so you keep yourself busy, and you make sure you give enough time to the things that need attention. But do you have like any apps or tools or like systems that you rely on heavily?
Not as many as I should, and here's why I'm a terrible producer.
Right.
And I'm a much better artist than a producer. I use calendar to stay organized, but I do the old-fashioned analog way. I make paper lists every day of goals.
Yeah.
And I have work goals and like just easy goals. So that like I'm a very goal-oriented person. I put on my list, go walk the dogs in the morning. So that way, when I cross off that thing off the list, I get a win. Right. Yes. And it's a small win, but it's still a win. And if I do it at 6 a.m, I got 3 wins before someone's already up in the morning. Right.
Yeah.
So for me, staying organized I'm not the best at it.
Right.
I manage it, but this is where a producer comes in. And this is also where, if you have an organized partner, a girlfriend, someone or boyfriend, whatever, husband, wife, whatever, they might help you too. Hey, man, here's your list for the day.
Yeah.
I'm not the best at it because, I'm an artist. My brain doesn't necessarily think in that way.
Same.
I've trained it to out of necessity. I'm sure there's amazing tools out there, and if anyone listening to this has a great one, please send it my way. I definitely need it, but I'm kind of an old analog paper guy. I love crossing off to-do lists. It's just rewarding. Okay, that's a simple win. It's a win under your belt. Go. And it brings a little joy knowing that I've knocked that list down at the end of the day, and I can crumple that paper up and throw it towards a trash can. That's right. And walk away.
But yeah, I think the key things there is like the fact that there is a reward to it. You got your tasks, you got your goals. It's about hitting them. And I guess ultimately all of them have the same outcome. It's about making sure you get your shit done, I guess. So you're a producer and you're an artist. So you run companies and you work for other companies as well. How do you switch between those things? Is there a switch, or is it like the same person on both, but you just do things a different way?
Well, one person is definitely better at it. The artist side's better at his job than the producer side. But this brings up kind of an interesting point. Like switching from being freelance to going back to studios brings up its own little hurdle, and it's something that most people probably won't know and I've been through it 2 times now, so it's important to talk about, I think. So when I first made the jump from working at the studios to opening my own studio, I did that until I got the Bad Robot gig for Star Wars. And because I didn't want to cancel my company for anything, but for Star Wars, no problem, dude. I'll do this. It's an awesome experience. So now I knew going into that, well, when I take this gig, I can't take on other client work. So I'm going to lose every single client that I've had that I've gained for these years. And it happened. They went, boom, to other people because they got productions to do. They can't wait on me, things like that. So this is something that I knew was coming, but I didn't realize how painful it was going to be. But, the benefits outweighed the losses because I made a whole new set of contacts at Bad Robot. So as soon as I took that gig, I lost almost all my clients because, they got jobs to do and they got deadlines to hit and they got to hire someone else. And let's say they hire someone. Oh, it was terrible, but I knew it was coming and I knew I was trading it for something good. Okay, so it was not pleasant, but I knew what was going to happen. I'm like,
so it was something that you kind of like anticipated and processed prior to making
the I did smart. Yep. I did a CBA on it, a cost benefit analysis. Okay. How much is it going to cost me? How much is it going to benefit? And let me analyze this data. Okay. It's worth it. Okay, fine. But, so this is something that most people won't think about. Like once you go freelance and you're on it for a little bit, you build up a great client list that you can survive on. This is great. I'm doing good. You get an awesome job offer. Okay, this is awesome. Cool. I'll take it. Now you're going to lose all those clients. Now you won't necessarily lose them forever. You can say, hey, I'm going to take this gig at Star Wars. They say, oh, great. Congratulations. This is great. Hit me when you're done. Okay, no problem. Yeah. So I finished the gig at Bad Robot. I did 3 films there, Star Wars, Star Trek, and 10 Cloverfield Lane. And once that ended, their visual effects branch had stopped too because it just formed to do those 3 shows. Okay. So now I'm back to being freelance again. Like, okay, how does this work? And hey, clients, I'm back. Okay, cool, Nick, great. We'll call you when we need you. All the good stuff. Now, in that amount of time, they found someone who's maybe better than me, maybe more expensive than me, maybe not as good as me, and maybe cheaper than me. So there's those 4 variables that they could have found. Yeah. So if I'm a producer and I had someone who's just as good as me and cheaper, boom, I'm going to stay with that guy because, bottom end is killer. So this is something that, it was a hurdle I had to cross. Okay, if I take these gigs, I know I'm going to lose my clients and it just takes some time to get it back. So that was kind of a fight to get them back. And I didn't get them all back by any means, but I got some of them back and then I got new ones as well. So it's one of those tricky things that no one ever tells you. And there's no book that says here's what's going to happen. It's just my personal experience. And it's something that any freelancer will have to experience. And it's something that you'll have to weigh. Do I want to stay freelance or am I okay taking this gig? Right. So it happened to me the first time at Bad Robot. I came back, I fought for it. And then when I took the VFX art director gig on Orville, a similar thing happened to me again. Okay, cool. You're going to lose X amount of your clients, but you're picking up the gig. It's steady and you'll make some new contacts. So it's really about weighing, like doing a CBA. Like, okay, what's the cost? What's the benefit? Let me see what's up. Let me analyze it. And is it going to be good or is it going to be bad? So how do you judge that? Well, it's really hard. There's no easy way to do it, but it's just something to think about as a freelancer and as a employee, right? Because when you go freelance, you're going to lose them all when you go employee again, unless you want to double time it and your employer doesn't mind that you double time, which most of them will because they want you fresh, as they should. But this probably brings up a good time to talk about the difference in freelance and employee. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I've something I think every artist should think about. And I did a talk in Amsterdam and I kind of highlighted some of this, and I think it was pretty beneficial to let people understand. I guess as a young artist, you kind of need to think about what kind of life do you want? Do you want the life of the hustle, or do you want the life of the easy gig where I go in 9 to 5 and I get my paycheck, but you're never really secure because if that company shuts down, your network is incredibly small, right? So, for instance, I worked at Rhythm and Hughes for 4 or 5 years, but some of the people there were there for 15, 20 years. They knew no one else in the industry unless they came through Rhythm, and they knew no other software unless, Rhythm had trained them in it. And Rhythm at the time had their own proprietary software. So they didn't know any other software other than what Rhythm had. So when Rhythm and Hughes shut down, they were hosed because they didn't know anyone. They'd never been anywhere, things like that. So you have security, you kind of don't, right? Yeah. So here's where a person needs to evaluate what kind of life do you want? Do you want to be freelance and do you want to hustle, or do you want to work for the studios and have your gig kind of guaranteed for you? And that's totally up to personal preference. There's pros and cons to each. But the way that I did it is I went employee first, make the contacts, get the experience, get paid to train, get better and better and better. And then once you have the contacts, then you can jump to be freelance. So that was what made the most sense to me, was let's just get trained, let's get some contacts, let's get some money, let's get paid. And then once you're good at what you do and you have the network, then it's a lot easier to go freelance. Starting off freelance, unless you're absolutely stunningly amazing, it's going to be a little difficult. So, so find that out and find out what kind of life you want too. That's another big one. Like, do you want to hustle? If you do, boom, freelance is for you, buddy. But if you just want to like, cruise and do your craft and have a good life and go home and see your, significant other and kids and all that stuff, you probably employees probably a little bit better. But, you just have to balance it with, if this employer shuts down, what does that mean for me then? Right. And, there's no guarantees in life. So there's no like, oh, this is going to work for everybody or this worked for me, so it will work for you. No, it's not like that. It's really about assessing your surroundings and doing a little foresight. Like what happens if this happens? Like do some if thens, to your situation. Right. So I hope that kind of sums it up. Like, if you want to be freelance, you'll have to hustle. If you want to be an employee, you'll do less hustling, but you're kind of susceptible to, a big hit if that company shuts down.
I think, that's perfect. And which one do you prefer? Do you have a preference?
I've actually, I've done them both. I like them both. The older I get, the more a employee life sounds great. Right. But I'm so used to being freelance and I've done so used to hustling. When I take a gig at a studio, I'm like out hustling everything. And I'm like, oh, I don't need to do that anymore. I can just like do this 40 hours a week. I don't need to like hustle anymore. I can just chill. I mean, I'm not saying you're not going to work hard. You will. But, like the hustle, I mean, the freelance hustle, the emails, the phone, hey, man, what's up? The beers, the dinners, the networking, all that stuff still has to be a daily part of your life. Like as a freelancer, you're going to need to go out for lunches. You're going to need to go out for beers, for dinners, things like that. You're going to need to buy a couple of drinks, keep your network alive. So it's very critical.
I think that answers my next question. But which one offers you more time to yourself?
I would say probably I don't know, actually. That's a hard one. If you're a successful freelancer, you're having less time.
Okay.
Because you're taking 2 or 3 jobs on.
Yes.
If you're just a regular employee, you're going to have you're going to be 40 hours a week, right?
Yeah,
so after that, you can do whatever you want, which is, that could be all the freedom you need. Now, that being said, as a freelancer, you can also take off 6 months. Yeah. And, all you're risking to lose is your clients. So here's another thing I didn't mention for the freelance thing. You're kind of trapped. It's something that I didn't really think about when I started to get, somewhat successful with clients.
Yep.
Is that it's hard for you to take off the time because then your clients are going to go find someone else.
Yes.
And then they may be cheaper than you and better, and then you're done. So it's never guaranteed. It's just about, assessing your surroundings and making the wisest decision with that. It's not easier. It's not harder. I don't know which one I really want to do long term. I mean, if I could get someone to guarantee me 40 hours a week for literally the rest of my life, I'd probably take it. Yeah. But I don't know that even exists.
Is that more for like security, or is that more for the fact that it's just, where your time's going and you can plan around it?
It's probably a little more for security, I think. I think if it's also too like a lot. I'm single, so I don't have a support backup person to help my bills, right? So that's a big one for me. If I had a spouse that was also bringing in cash, I'd probably be a little more risky with my decisions. So it's a little harder for me to do that. Simply because of that reason alone, I'm supporting myself in the house and kid and all that stuff. It's a lot going on. So factor all that in.
Yeah, for sure.
Basically.
And you've kind of done both, I guess. Well, you have done both. And how you definitely kind of answered it in terms of with what you've had to do with your approach in studio life, in freelance life. How has your career to this date affected you as a person in terms of in a positive way and a negative way?
Okay. And there's definitely both. There's definitely positive and negatives. Like my career, it's enabled me to achieve, I've achieved most of my career goals already. Like I've done a lot of the stuff that I really wanted to do. And, our career, when you get a pretty good gig, it pays well. It's not like you're making doctor money, but you're making good money and you're having a good life. And, if you draw reward from what you do, then that's also a big plus, because I actually love what I do and I get paid. So I'm kind of getting paid twice. Right. So that's one of the positive things from it is I've I've made good money for being an artist. I've made great money for being an artist, right? Most artists, I wouldn't think I thought I was going to be poor, to be honest with you. When I was in college, like, oh God, here we go.
Yeah.
But it's paid well, entertainment end. It's been a lot of fun. I've worked on cool projects. I've met really cool people, and I'm a fan of artists, so I like being around artists. So that's a big plus in the art world, especially in the entertainment world, is you're around other artists, and some of them are incredibly talented, and you'll learn a lot from them. So that's a big plus. It's rewarding in the physical and the mental end. I really like what I do. So I get reward from doing the paintings, and I also get reward when the paycheck shows up. Okay, great. Okay, cool. So we've covered the rewards and the positive side, and let's go with a little bit of the negative. There's not a ton of negative, but there's some. And maybe if I tell you mine, you can avoid on yours. So my first thing I would say is I probably worked too many hours. I did too many long days, too many 7-day weeks. I was doing 100-hour weeks as a standard for about a year or two of my life. Now that's terrible on your personal life. It's terrible on your relationships. Hence, I'm single. So it's not the best for that. Now that doesn't have to be that way. These were my choices that did that. I wanted the extra work. I wanted the money because I was trying to stack it and save it and buy a house. Right.
Yeah.
So, the negative part is probably I worked a little too much. Now that's some people say, oh, he's got too many jobs. He's complaining. Well, you try it. You try doing 100-hour weeks for 2 weeks and you'll complain too. Trust me.
Yeah.
So it was more about probably being a little too unhealthy, being a little too stressful. And when you're working 100-hour weeks, the only time you have, I'm just going to go out and have a couple of drinks and then I'm hungover the next day feeling like crap, right? Because I'm stressed.
Yes.
So managing stress was a big one. And again, this is before I was working out. So, once I started working out, that stress went away because I was burning it out with weights and listening to metal and screaming outside in the gym or something. So that was a big one. Other than that, there's not a ton of negatives unless you want to be with your family and your family lives in a city where there's no employment for you in this job, because you will need to be somewhat of a migrant worker. So, for instance, I migrated to California to do my job. A lot of people migrated from California to go to Canada. So a lot of people I know are in Montreal. A lot of people I know are in New Zealand, Sydney. So that could be a positive. You could not want to be around your family, or I want to get out of my town. It sucks here. Boom. Awesome, bro. You can go be wherever you want.
Yeah.
The negative could be you might need to go take a gig somewhere where your family's not.
Yes.
That's personal. It could be positive or negative. So that's really up to you. That's one of the things about our industry is you probably will need to migrate to get to a city that does this, unless you're lucky enough to already live in a cool city that does this, right? Like if you live in Vancouver or Montreal, you're made right now because there's thousands of jobs for you right now. And that's awesome. Congrats to you, But for me, if I were to go there, I'd have to migrate and leave my friends and family. So that's just part of the gig, and it could be a positive, could be negative. Let's see what else. There's not a lot of negative, to be honest. I think just the long hours, but it didn't have to be that way. I could have said no.
Okay.
And I could have just done the 40 and been like, good dude, I got a wife, kids. That's all I'm doing, bro. No worries. But I was chasing that dollar and chasing that dream. And, it got me to a good place. I'm super happy where I'm at, but it was a lot of work to get here for sure. But if someone said, can you do it over? What would you do differently?
Yeah.
Stress less, drink less, work a little bit less.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
With your insight in the industry, you're very experienced. You know how the studio system works. You know how freelance works. We've got this thing called COVID right now that has affected the entire globe.
Yep.
Firstly, how has it affected work for you at the moment, if at all? And do you see that changing the industry going forward? Because obviously everyone's kind of working remotely at the moment, right?
Yep. This is a great question, and there's a lot of cool answers here. I'll first start off with how it affected me, and then I'll get into like the theoretical part of it, how I think it's a positive for a lot of people in a lot of ways. At first, I was, like I said, I was working on Orville, VFX art director, and our production shut down because they can't shoot anymore. We were mid-shoot and they had to stop. So that gig ended. So boom. So now I'm back to being freelance and I have to hunt down my clients who I have let go again. So right during COVID, I'm back in the hunt. Okay. So that wasn't the coolest part ever. Like, oh man, I'm in the hunt again. And at the absolute worst time to hunt. So, okay, no worries, but some gigs are coming in here and there. No big deal. And that's part of the reason why the timing was great, because I was able to finish up this course for Learn Square. Yes. So that's a big plus for me there. Yep. So that I think was kind of how it affected me. It kind of I took a little kneecap, but also, to be honest with you, I could have used a little time off. So the first month I was loving it. I'm like, cool, we'll take a month off, be back and no problem. Boom, boom, boom. I was actually really stoked. I'm like, cool, man, I get a month at home with my daughter. We'll hang out. We'll, watch some TV, play some games. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
All right, that lasted for about a month. And I'm like, okay, well, this is not going to end, is it? Okay, no, it's not. So then that's that. So, now I'm back in the hunt, and that's kind of my situation. But the overall view of COVID, I actually think it's positive in a few ways. Definitely for our industry, I think there's some positive notes to hit. Now, I know anyone who's out of work right now, oh, Nick says it's positive. No, I'm not happy you're out of work. Don't look at it like that.
Of course.
This is more of what a big positive I see. So I shouldn't name the name of the company, but it's a big video game company. They make video games that you all know. I know for sure you know the title. Yeah. They have an office in Santa Monica, and they essentially said, okay, we're going to have to shut down for COVID. Everyone grab your computer, take it home, and we'll keep working. Okay. So they noticed a very, very small drop in productivity, almost nothing, because they had their own machines from work. Everything was already on there. Everyone was already an employee, so no one had to be trained. Everyone just basically went home, used their own electricity to do their work for them. So now they're saving on electricity and they're saving on rent. And rent at a big studio is, you're talking millions of dollars a year, a ton of money. Yep. So this particular studio said, hey, man, we asked all of our employees, we did a poll. Everyone said, like, overwhelmingly, like 90% of the people said, yeah, let's work from home from now on. So they canceled their lease. That was like a million a year. Something was insane, the amount of money they were paying. So they canceled their lease, and now they're full-time working from home. So that means anyone across the world can now work for this company, and they don't need to live in Santa Monica. Yep. So that is a massive positive. I think it's a massive positive, because now someone in Bangladesh can work on a production in Santa Monica. It's awesome, right? That's super cool. And I think that is the positive that I see in this, is that studios are understanding we don't need this massive overhead called rent and electricity and insurance and things like that. Now, granted, this may take some of the employees. This may take you down from employee to freelancer, because maybe they'll log you at 30 hours and not 40. Yeah, but hey, that's fine. You can use this extra 10 to train, to create some assets if you're owned to sell, to hustle. Use this extra 10 to do something, or work on Blender, buddy, or in Unity and Unreal, or hang out with your family. It's totally up to you. So, So I think that is a massive positive that people aren't quite seeing yet, is that studios are understanding for the first time ever, hey man, we can get by on Zoom calls, and they will pay for their own electricity and rent, and all we got to do is give them a computer, and that's it. So that's super cheap, and that's a massive overhead that now they're saving money. So now maybe they can afford to pay you more. I doubt they will, but they'll probably, at least you can work from home with your family. If you don't like that, I guess people who don't like to be at home, that's a different story. It might suck for you, but I think it's a big net positive. I really do. And I know that's hard to say when people are out of work right now, and it's a lot of struggling going on, a lot of, pain, people losing loved ones. But I think for our industry long term, I think it could be a positive thing. I really do.
Yes. Cool. And now,
go
ahead. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying, it's training people to work from home, which, for me, that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing, but it's also giving you a little bit of free time. If you're down, train, man. Like, learn Blender, learn something new. Like, this is an awesome time for that. Yeah. And this is a great time to buy a certain Learn Squared course called 3D Sequence Illustration and get your game on.
Perfect segue. So 3D Sequence Illustration, which is your course with Learn Squared. And you'll definitely give us a breakdown of what it is in a second. For me personally, this is like my workflow at the moment. So seeing the way you do things, I've just literally glanced at every single lesson so far during the promotion period, and already I've taken tips to adapt to my workflow. So I can't wait to actually go through it in detail, do a proper project on it, and see what it does for me. But firstly, you're no stranger to teaching, right?
I'm sorry?
You're no stranger to teaching, right?
Yep. I was a teacher at Miami Art Institute for 2 semesters.
It shows, because I think the way you communicate things is not even like as a teacher, just generally speaking to you today, you're definitely a great communicator. And when it comes to teaching your workflow, it definitely shows in the course straight away. So that's one of the key things I took away, just even by
that's great.
Glancing at it. So yeah, if you want to talk about the genesis of the course and why it is the format that it is, and obviously we can also speak after that about how it blends in with our other course, 2D Sequence Illustration, with Patrick O'Keefe.
Yep.
So over to you.
Awesome. Yep. Cool. So yeah, for this course, I think part of what I really wanted to do was show the new workflow that I had been developing, especially that kind of like really fine tuned at Fox. I had been developing before that, but once I got there, I was actually reading scripts and translating from the script to 3D. Right. So that was like, cool. This is such a good lesson to really teach, because I think it could be very beneficial to people, and especially not just in a production environment. Anyone who has their own story to tell. I've been working on the story in my head for years. I want to get it out into the screen. Boom. This is your course. This is how you do that. So I took basically all the lessons that I had learned from that workflow in a production environment, getting something from a script, getting it off paper onto the screen. And I think once I kind of tooled that together, I said, okay, this is going to be a great lesson to really teach and show this new workflow of 3D that's just going to change the game in the next, decade moving forward. And, I kind of break it down into a few simple chapters. Like chapter 1, we cover character creation, which, you can go as deep as you want or as simple as you want. It really depends on your skill set. And then chapter 2, we cover set design. And then chapter 3, we're covering shot design, which is my favorite chapter. I love that chapter. I cover so much cool stuff in that. And then chapter 4, we go into painting, right? So inside of this whole course, you don't need to be a master 3D artist, because you can just do the basic things in 3D, establish your scene, establish your camera, get your layout, and you can paint on top. Like say, for instance, more like what Patrick does, because he does basic 3D stuff, and then you paint on top. So my course is perfect for that. So it lends itself to any kind of skill set, and it's not software specific. I happen to use Maya in it, but you can use whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, because there's nothing I do in Maya you can't do in Blender, C4D, etc.
And like with how you mentioned using it on Orville as well. Has your workflow adapted much since doing the course, or is this pretty much how you work at the moment?
That's it's definitely changed a little bit, especially using because I use so many assets in the course. I found towards the end, I found a smarter way to manage some of these assets, and I actually thought about doing a little amendum to the course. Like, hey, after doing this for 9 paintings now, I have a better way to kind of do the end of it. So I did learn it, and this is just about render power. Essentially, instead of bringing my live assets into my Maya scene, I set up Redshift proxies in their own file, and then import those into Maya, which is essentially a Clarice workflow. And this is kind of how I learned it, because I was training with Weta on Clarice, and I said, oh my God, I should be doing this for Maya. Oh, I've already finished the course. Maybe I should make it a little update. So
you're more than welcome to.
That's the one thing So I might record a little bit and might add it on, but it's essentially just being smarter with your assets. But I have such a fast computer, I kind of I lean on hey, let's just dump all the data in there.
Yeah, for sure.
The render time's fast anyway. It's only a minute. Who cares?
Yeah.
But I know other artists don't have that, so I would think I'd be a good little add-on. Like, hey man, just work smarter, not harder.
I think that's a key thing with 3D, especially a lot of people who don't use 3D, especially to the extent that you do. The fact that it can slow down computers if you don't use assets in the right way, or maybe don't have the equipment to handle that. It can just be like, I don't want to bother with this. But just to get it out there, that there are ways to optimize things so you can still get what you need to get done.
Totally. Yep. There absolutely are. Yep.
And another thing with the 3D side of things as well is we did a few inquiries about a few of the students, some who have actually taken Patrick's course as well, wanted to take this course, obviously so, because it blends perfectly well into that. But they were like, do I need to know 3D? Do I need to know certain background knowledge to certain things as well? But the way you use it is in a way that you need to have a deep knowledge of 3D. It's not about, moving... creating the assets from scratch. It's just the medium you're using, the platform you're using to create your story, and ultimately the goal is to make that story, which in this case is based on one of your own IPs, right? Or an IP that you're developing. So again, this is perfect. This isn't this is something that you want to do. So you've done that for something that you want to create as well. And I think if you want to touch upon so for students or some people that may be wondering, do I need to know 3D, or what do I need to know in advance before I start this course? What would you say to those people? Is there anything they need to know, or can they jump in straight away?
Yeah, I think it would benefit you to have a basic understanding of 3D. You don't need to know like all the specifics because I don't really dive too deep into Maya. I'm more just covering my workflow for the broad process.
Yeah.
So I think having a basic understanding of 3D would be good. A basic understanding of Photoshop would be good. And, just having watched films and TV your whole life, which you've probably already done anyway, right?
Yes.
So because in the shot design course, I really go over how to frame shots, how to compose a shot, how to light a shot. So things like that. There's nothing software dependent in that. This is more theory, right? So like, how do you stage a shot for a dialogue scene? Yeah. How do you stage a shot for an action scene? There's all these cool little bits of data in there. They have nothing to do with software at all. It's more theory and workflow and principle. So that's why chapter 3 is probably my favorite because it's more just theory. Yeah. So chapter 2 will be a little bit 3D heavy because this is when we're staging our scene and our layout. Yeah. But basically all I do in Maya, grab an object, move it. Rotate it, place it. Cool. Okay, does this look cool in the camera? Boom. Awesome. Move. So I'm not like building anything. Well, there is some building when we customize our sets. But for the most part, it's just pushing polys and tweaking things and adding lights. So it's not a very, very technical course as far as like you need to get the nuts and bolts under the hood of the 3D. It's more the broad overview of here's my workflow, starting from scratch, using 3D assets, laying out these assets in a way that fits my narrative, and then tweaking these assets to make them unique and mine, and then lighting it to be beautiful, and then rendering and painting in Photoshop. So the last little bit, most of the work is 3D, but chapter 4 is all Photoshop. So it's just paint work, and just a basic understanding of Photoshop should get you through that. Yep. So I think a basic Photoshop, basic 3D, and you'll be good to go. You're going to learn either way. There's so much data in this course. Yeah, it's jam-packed.
With the mention about like knowing a bit of 3D or basic 3D, what do you mean when you mention that? What were you specifically referring to? It's just more like being comfortable in a 3D package?
Yeah, or just having a basic understanding of how to move cubes around, and how to pan and navigate around your scene. You don't need to know what's under the hood. You just kind of need to know how to, like for instance, I don't know how my engine works in my car, but I know how to drive it.
Yes.
Right.
Great
just that basic understanding. Okay, cool. Here's what I need to know. Need to move things around, pan a camera, create a camera, that kind of stuff. But I do not get into any super detailed stuff at all because I just think this course was more about when I was talking with Mo on setting it up. It was more about let's get the workflow down. Like what is the overall macro view, and let's leave the micro view alone because someone might not use Maya. Someone may be using Blender, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing I do in Maya you can't do in any other 3D app by all means.
And like you mentioned before about how where the industry's heading, that's a perfect way to approach that because sooner rather than later, the tools are going to be so accessible. It is going to be about the theory behind things and how you accomplish the brief and the problem set out to you to solve. Yep. So that's a great way to approach it. Particularly on like assets, you have a lot of them. You have a massive library of them. You create your own, obviously mentioned before as well. Quick shout out to Kitbash 3D because if you do get the course, you do get a discount on their kits, which you use in the course as well to build obviously your scene and your sets. Like what are your go-to places for assets? Do you have like a certain place where like I gotta go to these guys? These are my first stop to get my assets.
Yes, I do. Yep. Kitbash 3D is one, and the other one is Daz 3D. And in this course, chapter 1 is all Daz, but that chapter is all character creation. Yeah. But Daz does not have just characters. They have a ton of awesome sets. And in fact, a lot of the sets I use in the course are Daz as well. Yeah. So my first go-to is Kitbash and then Daz. And other than that, I use a little bit of Turbo Squid, and I use a little bit of like CG Warehouse or something like that. But to be honest, the best products out there in the market are Kitbash by far, 100%. And then Daz in a close second.
And what would you like to see students take away from the course in terms of like obviously main thing is we're going to get a kick out of seeing all the amazing work people are going to do. That's the first hit we always get. But what key thing would you like or key takeaway would you like students to have?
I think one of my favorite lessons that I cover in the course is establishing shots for different narratives. Like what is the narrative of this shot? Is it a dialogue shot? How do I do a dialogue shot? I don't know. I've never done one. Boom. Now you know. How do I do an action shot? I've never done one. Boom. Now you know. So I think one of the coolest things that I got from the course, or at least teaching that I liked the most, was explaining how to set up a shot. Because it's something that most people don't know. Like, how do I know how to frame my subject? How do I know how to frame for dialogue? How do I know how to do an establishing shot? So there's so much information on storytelling that is in this course. I think that's one of my favorite things that I'm looking forward to seeing is because I don't cover how to make assets. I cover how to tell stories,
Yes,
kind of, right?
yes.
Like how do you bring your story to life, or how do you bring this writer's story from the page to your screen? And that's kind of what I'm looking forward to the most, is seeing people's stories. Like, cool, man, I'm glad you got that out of your head and onto the screen. This is awesome, right?
Yeah, 100%. There's a bit that I like in the course that really stood out to me, and it just made complete sense. And I was thinking, why haven't I done this before? It's where you got like a bird's eye view of your scene. You got literally a street view laid out, and you just say this is where it's going to be set. And that was just like, that makes complete sense. That's the simplest way. That saves like how many hours of moving things around in 3D to figure out which one looks the best. Super smart, super simple. And I haven't even taken the course properly yet, and that was already my takeaway from just even seeing
cool.
that. Man,
I'm glad that worked. There's a lot of times where problems are very quick to solve in 2D, and that was one of them. Like, hey man, let's just get a layout of our street. Here's what I want. I want to have this top-down street with a split at the end, and I want to have it angled as a hill. Okay, easy to do in 2D, no problem. So now when I get to 3D, it's that much faster, right?
Yeah. Cool. I guess we can look at wrapping it up in a few moments. Just a few more final things on the course itself. If you listen to this, we're probably going to release this like this week or tomorrow maybe. So when you listen to this, the early bird discount is actually live right now. So you get 40% off the course, which basically $74. And you get all this amazing information straight away. If you want to check out the course before you even make a commitment to buy, the first lesson is free on all of our courses, so you get to see exactly the first one's mainly focused on character, but you do get an insight into Nick, his experience, and also what you're going to get from the course going forward. And man, Nick, thank you very much for your time. One more thing I want to ask you before we wrap up, like, even with the COVID stuff going on now, where things are kind of like uncertain, what does the future hold for you? Like, what's next for you?
That's a really good question. I'm probably going to take the next little bit of time and train. I'm definitely going to learn Blender in and out, and then I'm heading up for Unity and Unreal next. Those are my next two technical achievements. Other than that, just stay healthy and stay safe out there.
Awesome. Dude, thank you very much.
Great. It's awesome to be this, and I hope everyone loves the course. I'm excited to share. This is going to be a really fun course full of knowledge.
For sure. A big thanks to Nick for his amazing insights and being our guest. 3D sequence illustration is available right now, and you can learn the first lesson for free too. Also be sure to check out our sequence bundle, which includes 3D sequence illustration from Nick and 2D sequence illustration from Patrick O'Keefe. A great way to cover all the dimensions and at a discount. Till next time.